This episode is brought to you by the Marine Corps League. Once a Marine, always a Marine. Semper Fidelis.
On today's episode, we welcome one of the Lost Art Project Veterans' Voices, Historical Archivist, to bring us another veteran story.
Yay! Welcome everybody watching this. This is the Lost Art Project Veterans Voices, and I'm Dee Galvin, Historical Archivist here in California, and I'm doing this for my husband, Bruce Galvin. That's why I do these interviews, to honor him. He passed away this year, and he is a Marine guarding the gates of heaven. And without further ado, I'm introducing Ted Sosnicki, Navy veteran, and he was Dana's best friend. So this is going to be a super fun, awesome interview for me today. I'm super excited. He's coming from Arizona. And we'll just start with your childhood, how you grew up, and what was that like, Ted?
Well, growing up was kind of interesting. It was, I was born in Tucson and raised basically in Glendale, Arizona. And we started off life as the largest baby ever born at the hospital back in 1962 and stayed that way all the way up until after Desert Storm.
Wow.
But other than that, went to school here, played around, did everything else. Lots of friends. Got into drag racing when I was in high school. And the interesting part was, at the time, I was always interested in studying the military and what was going on, stuff like that. I used to build model ships, model aircraft, spacecraft, all that fun stuff. And just, pretty much that. When I went to high school, I went to Glendale Union High School and finished off. When I graduated, I was 2 credits shy of an associate's in metals engineering on top of my regular high school stuff. Played football, all other fun junk, track field, baseball. That's pretty much it.
That's awesome. Do you think so? It was a good childhood. You sounds like you enjoyed it, did a lot of fun stuff, kept busy.
Yeah, it kept me busy.
So, okay, so what made you decide to join the military? I love the coin flipping story. You have to add that.
Well, it's like I said, I think I kind of decided it, and I didn't think about it that much, but back in starting in grade school, just studying military, and I come from a big military family anyhow. My dad was in the Army. I had uncles that served in the Army, the Air Force. I had a distant uncle that was in the Navy. I later found out where he was at, and that was kind of an interesting, fun time. He was with Special Forces back in Vietnam, so it was, yeah. And I think I had one that was in the Marines.
Who is that?
But the decision on which branch to go into was the funniest one, because I'd been going down, talking to all the different recruiters, and now that I think back, I was like, I wish I would have really, been a little bit more grown up and studied, actually read everything clearly, such as the scholarship for NAU that was offered for an associate's degree. Well, it said if you kept your, later in the write-up, it talks about everything, and it says, oh, by the way, if you keep your grades up to this GPA, it will revert into a 4-year education, full scholarship. Now, I didn't read that part, so I was like, well, what's a 2-year scholarship? It ain't going to do anything. I'm already only a couple credits shy of getting it anyhow. I'll get it later. But it got down to the Marine Corps and the Navy. Both offered me exactly the same thing. And both offices, you'd come into this little cubby hole, and then both doors were on either side. One was Marine, one was the Navy. And I said, okay, look, here's the deal. Pulled out a quarter. I said, call it in the air. And that was the decision maker.
That coin was wrong. You should have been a Marine. Just kidding.
But yeah, I pretty much knew I was going to go in at that time. High school, a lot of my friends went in. Most of them went in the Marine Corps. Had, I think, 2 of them that went into the Air Force. A couple of them in the Army. And I ended up in the Navy.
Like my dad. That's awesome. And what was your boot camp experiences like?
Went to boot camp back in 1980 to San Diego, California. And very interesting because when I showed up, they were kind of, they normally come in, you get all these little companies together, and then they split you up into your groups, and you have a whole division. Well, they had an experimental thing that they were going to run. And the idea was, because the Marine Corps starts off almost identical as the Navy in the first 4 weeks, it was, why don't we combine the two to save money? So everything the Marines did, we did. Everything the Navy did, they did. And we did that for 4 weeks. And then we weren't even a full division. Full division at that time was 6 companies. We only had 3. So other than, I think we only had one guy that tried to jump ship and ended up, of course, over there, you jump over the fence and then you're on the Marine Corps base, and you jump over the next fence, if you're able to make it to it, is the airport. Well, he didn't make it to the airport. So he had a little workout for a while, and then they finally came back and gave him back to us.
Oh.
And he was demoted to the next company back and evaluated and all this other stuff. But it was comical.
That is a good one. So that pretty much sums up your boot camp experience, right?
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
So what about your military training? I know you sent me a little summary, which was really nice. I got
I've got
all the military training.
The average person in the Navy who does 20 to 23 years has probably done only about half of what I've done. I don't know, out of accident or whatever, but from boot camp, I went to basic aviation A&P school in Tennessee. Then I went on from there to my actual rating, and I did that. And then I went on to my aircraft training, which was over in my initial aircraft training, which was in Lemoore, California. Then I ended up overseas in Japan. But over the many, many years, the 20 years, I had actually attended, on top of my first aircraft, which is the A7, I attended T2 training, A4 training, TA4, A6, KA6, EA6, P3s, T39s, PR school, shipboard firefighting, shipboard damage control, aircrew school, special warfare school, military training instructor school, MAA school, CBR special weapons school, and even did F-14 and several other little small ones here and there. But out of all that training, I actually got to fly in the T2, the T39, the TA4Js, the A6, the EA6, C2, C30, C130s, H1s, H46s, 53s, H3s, a TC4C, and of course the C9, which you travel around on that one, and only had to deal with one crash in that one.
I love your photographic memory. I'm so jealous. The way you rattle things off like the computer brain, I love that. So what about duty stations? Any stories about your duty stations that you want to share?
Duty stations was a lot. The ones I was actually assigned to at Millington was a training. I'd been to that one twice, because once as a going through school, the other time was as to become an instructor and teach the school. NES Lemoore for the A7, Yokosuka, Japan, Atsugi, Japan, Coronado, Beeville, Texas, Pensacola, Meridian, Mississippi, Little Creek, Virginia, NES Oceana, Whidbey Island, Washington.
I like what you said about instructor training. Now I know, because I know you and my late husband used to do a lot of training and instructing at work. So now I know where you learned it, your first experiences with that. That's awesome.
I picked it up really good, and it's one thing that when I was teaching A school, one of the evaluators came in, and not to make it sound political or anything, but there was a individual that was trying to get me failed as far as evaluation, but he was much senior than me, and I don't know why he had a beef with me. I never really talked to him that much. So anyhow, he got it lined up to where I got evaluated by a class that had failed that one particular course in air conditioning pressurization twice. They only had one more time before they had to figure out whether they were going to send them back or send them off to other ratings or whatever, thinking they didn't have the aptitude. And the evaluator was probably the one that you
Ted, something's happening with your audio. I don't know what it is.
It could be just my phone service.
Let's pause and reload. Hold on.
The instructor evaluator was a Marine. He was known throughout the entire base as the hardest one to ever go up in front. He had failed more instructors and made him go back to instructor training, or go on to the fleet and forget about being an instructor. And so he came in, and there's a process you have to go through. And so I sat down with him ahead of time, and I said, okay, I said, we have a unique thing. And I explained to him about the class. And I said, I need to do a couple things that are a little unorthodox and not within the curriculum, but I need to find out why these kids are failing, and then how to change the training so that it benefits them. And he goes, okay, I'm interested. Well, while I'm getting set up in the class, 6 other instructors in the school talked to him, asking if they could sit in and watch, because they had heard about my training, but they had never seen it. And so he goes, well, he says, let me ask. He asked me. I said, I don't care if it was in here. It doesn't bother me a bit. And he goes, okay, fine. And he told him, he says, you guys can be in here, but you have to sit in the back. Don't make any noises. Don't make faces, nothing. He says, or I'll turn around and nail you. So they were like, okay. So the first thing we started off with was finding out what each student knew. And I had some that had really had very little mechanical background, which is really hard when you're trying to go into a mechanical field. But they had things that they had worked on. Like one worked on a washer and dryer before. One had worked on toasters. One of the females didn't work on anything, but she played with her, she had to fix her hair dryer one time. And so it was like little things like that. I went, okay. I said, we can work with that. So I put them all on break, sat down with the evaluator, and I said, okay, this is how I'm going to do it. I said, I'm going to bounce around a little bit, but I said, this is the category I'm going to go. And he goes, okay, that's fine, as long as you cover all the topics. I went, okay. Brought him back in. We started teaching it, and I applied everything these kids knew to doing all this training and how the equipment works and so on and so forth. And got it all done and put it back on break. And I said, well, we need to have one more thing. And of course, the instructors with the evaluators with me he says, you didn't stomp your foot, you didn't tap on anything. He says, and I didn't understand how you could correlate all these pieces of devices into air conditioning pressurization. But he says, after you got done, he says, it made sense. And I went, well, exactly. He says, but do you know what's on the test? And I said, no, and I don't care. I said, when I if they understand it, they're going to pass the test. And he goes, okay, we'll see what goes on. So bring it back in, finished up the class, sent them out on lunch break. And everybody's like, oh man, I don't know. I said, just don't worry about it. Breathe, go get your lunch, relax, come back. I said, and we'll get you prepped for the test, and then we'll take the test and you guys will pass it. So the evaluator normally doesn't stick around, but this time he did. He goes, I want to see what's going to happen on the test. Now, note, the highest score in that class before was, I think, 56. And you have to score a minimum of 70. When they got done with my training and they went in and took the test, and I put them all at ease and everything else, and just said, do this. I said, you can ask questions. And I said, the other petty officers here will answer your questions. I said, I'm not going to get involved in that part. And they were like, okay. I said, but trust me. I said, all of you are going to pass. I said, you know why? And they're like, well, why? Well, one thing I didn't talk about was we started the class off with, I said, we're going to make sure nothing leaks out. So I had everybody put their left hand up, put their index finger out, and then stick it in their left ear. And then I went and I taught the class that way. And of course, the kids were laughing and enjoying it, but they thought it was funny. And they didn't all keep their finger in there the whole hour, but they were just went on. And the evaluator, he goes, why did you do that? And I said, haven't you seen the commercial where the guy's talking and the words just keep going out? I said, well, if I plugged it up, it'd stay in there. And he looks at, shakes his head, he goes, really? I said, no, let's see. We'll see how that works. The lowest score when they took that exam was an 82. 2 kids almost made 100% on it. And he walked back in, and that individual that was set it up this way with the hopes that I was, he goes, well, is he going to have to go back? Does he need to go back? Can we get rid of him out of the school? And he goes, no. He says, this is your best instructor you have. He goes, he does things a little bit different, but he's got a background for it. And he says, and no, you're stupid for even trying to oust him out of this thing. He goes, your other instructors should be following him.
Amen.
And that just torqued his shores. But so my evaluation went good. Students went on at the end of at their school track. They have, photos and stuff like that go on. And normally it's whoever your instructor that's assigned to your particular class. That's the one that's up in the photos. That didn't happen with this class. They wanted me in the photo as well as their assigned instructor. So I came over, we took photos and stuff like that. I got a picture of it somewhere.
Oh, Send it to us. We'll figure out somewhere to put it. Man, that's cool. We'll have to do part 2 of the interview and show it. So that was your duty station. Do you have any other duty stations?
Yeah.
Yep.
NES Meridian was a lot of fun because I got to do a lot of flying in there. Flying in jets is cool. It's always been my passion. I was also able to complete my bachelor's degree there with my intent of becoming a naval aviator. And unfortunately, due to what's the word to use for this thing? I'm not going to say political changes. There were changes in the system for right sizing, as they called it. And part of that was you had to be able to complete flight training and get your wings before a specific date. And I would have missed it by, I think, 8 months. And I asked, what about doing a waiver because I'm active duty? And right in the message, it said waivers would not be authorized. And many, many years later, I found out that wasn't quite true. Certain ones would not be approved. Mine being one of them. But we won't go in because the other part could be considered political. So I'll leave that one out, why these other people made it and I didn't. And yet we had the same exact birthday.
Thank you. I know it's hard to hold back on that stuff. So we're doing it right, AJ, the CEO of the Lost Art Project. So thank you for that. Can you hear me okay, Ted? I know you were having problems with that earlier. Do you hear me okay?
I mean, VA 55 was fun. Little Creek was interesting. That was special warfare time frame, and it was there were goods and bads in that one. Because I was assigned to Special Warfare Group 6. So we spent a lot of time in the Middle East. Didn't care for the Middle East. I don't like heat. And don't care about sand. So, but it was all pretty good. I mean, it was all my duty stations. I mean, every duty station you go to is going to have goods and bads. And I don't care who it is. A couple of them will always be memorable because of the people, the leadership that I had at the time. My time on the Midway was just amazing. We had a captain in charge of the ship by McGrail. And I have never found anybody say anything negative about him.
Nice.
And when he was the captain of the Midway Battle Force received every possible command award for the entire Pacific Fleet. And that same year, RCO for the squadron that I was attached to, which is VA 93, was Finney. And Finney was he became a pilot during Vietnam, flew several missions, got shot down once, and managed to make it out, thanks to his dad giving him a special gun that he carried with him all the time as a good luck souvenir. But he had dropped it, and it ended up shooting the VC that had stopped him when it hit the ground. And it's because the gun was known to fire if you had something in the chamber, if you dropped it. But I kept in contact with Finney for years. I mean, the last duty station I was able to call and talk to him, he was in charge of NORAD. Amazing man. VT7 was great. The CO there I knew really well. In fact, he was the one that took me out of my first jet pop. So he loved that one. VA 55, at first when I got in there, it wasn't that great, but toward the end of it, phenomenal command. The CO just thought the world of me. The other ones, I mean, there's goods and bads on them all.
What about your deployments?
Yeah. Oh, deployments are long. I've been on so many deployments I can't keep straight. Well, let's see. We did the Japan multiple times. Diego Garcia, QB Point, Philippines. Been deployed on the Midway, the Coral Sea, the Saratoga, the Lincoln, the Kennedy, the Pennsylvania, the Dallas. Been to Misawa, Japan, Adak, Alaska, Sigonella, Italy, or Sicily, however you want to look at it. Barbers Point, Bahrain, Masira, which are both over in the Middle East and Saudi Arabia. Some of the areas that I was at in Saudi Arabia were right up on the border because that was just prior to or the beginning of Desert Shield. And we stayed there for all Desert Shield and Storm. Been to Roosevelt Roads in Puerto Rico, been on the Kitty Hawk in New Jersey, the Blue Ridge. Been to the RAAF base in Prince, Australia. Spent a month over there. Osan and Tagu, Korea. Okinawa, Fallon, Nevada, White Sands, New Mexico, Nellis Air Force Base. Of course, Desert Shield and Storm, Persian Gulf, Lebanon. Been to Dubai, Riyadh, King of Khaid Military City, which is in Saudi Arabia, Guantanamo Bay, El Centro, Guam, on the Yellowstone, been to Cyprus and Jeddah. And they're not in order. That's how I just remembered. I made a list of it. And I was like, I've been to a lot of places. I think that's all of them.
What was either your favorite one or your most impactful one or something that you want to share?
Favorite one. Well, I liked ADAC because it was nice and cold. I love that. Northern Japan, when we were up in Misawa, loved it because it was snowing the whole time. Everybody thought I was nuts because I'd come in from the barracks to the airfield in the same way I did when I was in stationed up in Whidbey Island, Washington. There's two of us in the command, and I would walk in with shorts, t-shirt, and my boots, and there would be snow on the ground and everything else. He came in with flip-flops, so when I saw that, I bowed down to him. I said, "Oh, you're the best." I said, "You win."
Oh man!
And he was from Hawaii, so I was like, he goes, "Yeah, I don't like the heat either." But loved all that. Loved Japan, or really enjoyed Japan a lot. Philippines was fun. Oh God. How to think. Hawaii was. I didn't spend a lot of time in Hawaii, only because of our missions. But I know my ships. I started on the Midway. The next one was the Coral Sea. And at that point, I thought if I ended up spending 30 years in, I might actually get to a new ship. Well, my next one ended up being on the Lincoln. She was just coming out of manufacturing, so we got on there for some test trials, and I was like, "Hey, I'm on a new one!"
Yay!
And it was pretty good. Kennedy wasn't too bad. Bases, I mean, they all had different things. I mean, there were great things about them. The Air Force bases, the first time I ever went onto those, that was the big shocker, because the first one was in the Philippines. And my boss at the time was with me. We went to go get something to eat. And we're standing in line. And this is that night, because we came in there early in the morning, during the day. And the guy goes, the little sign says, steaks to order. So we stand up there, and the guy's looking at us going, well, how do you want your steak? And we went, on our tray? And he goes, no, how do you want it? You want them rare, medium rare, well done? And he goes, and I looked at him, I went, and I looked at my boss going, what do we say? On the ship, it's, you ask for whatever it is, you go, oh, I want rare. And they hand you one that's medium well. And I'm like, no, I want a rare. And he goes, no. I said, the sign says steaks to order. He goes, yeah. And the head chef ordered all this way. So here we are on an Air Force base. It's like, rare? He goes, you want just a little pink or a lot of pink? And then red. And I went, red? And then he goes, okay. Flips it over, cuts it open. How's that? And I was like, that's good. And then breakfast was the same way. I mean, come in and go up there, get eggs, and we're figuring we're going to have the usual scrambled eggs. They could be green, yellow. It just depends on whatever color the power was. And we go up there, and he goes, well, how do you want your eggs? And I'm going, all these trick questions.
Yeah, right? Is this a joke, right? Are you going to razz me, right?
Over easy. Put some on there. I was like, I mean, we should have known there was going to be something weird, because in the Navy, you get a tray, and it's got 6 slots, 2 of them are for silverware. In the Air Force, you get a tray, and you put a dish on it, and some other dishes, and I'm going, okay, this is odd. But yeah, that was the biggest things we ever noticed. And all the Air Force bases loved going to them for food. They always said that the Navy had the best, but I'm like, no, Air Force has much better. Mm-hmm. And the living conditions were much better.
Oh man. Yep. That's what I hear. The Air Force had the best food. Thank you. I love hearing the stories about the food, man. Sounds like a 5-star restaurant down to the, how pink do you want it? And like showing you, that's amazing.
Oh yeah. That was always our joke was, the Air Force comes in and they tell the government, we need a base here. And then they get them all the money for it. And they go in, they build all the amenities first. Have the best barracks, the best quarters, the best everything. And then they come back and go, well, we ran out of money. We need some for the runways.
I love it.
Yeah, I'm like, gee, the Navy goes, okay, we're going to build this, all the weapons holding, the maintenance, and the runways. Oh, we need some money for barracks. Well, we can put them up in a Quonset hut for right now.
We need to take a quick audio break. I'm going to pause.
An anthem. It's they used to have really good service here, and that was because our church, which is down the road, used to have. They got authorization from the HOA to install a tower, so it's really close. Well, then they found out the church was making money on this. And the HOA wasn't. So they turned around and they said, oh, no, now you have to get rid of it. Well, as soon as they did, the service went to pot because the nearest antennas are halfway across the city. So it goes in and out and in and out.
Bummer. I had some problems recently, too. So that was your deployment. Any other deployment stories?
A lot of them I can't talk about.
Dang. That's right. You told me before. Dang.
My first experience on a sub was interesting. I've learned, in fact, that was a interesting thing. I went on the Pennsylvania. That was the first one. And dropped below the water and stuff. And I had, about a year afterwards, I'd finished off my degree and tried to get into the ALCS part of it. And I had somebody, he goes, he says, I can get you an officer. I can guarantee that you will make it to this rank within this amount of time. And I'm going, how the heck can you guarantee that? And I'm thinking to myself, and of course, I'm not talking out loud. And then I looked and I went, oh, he's got subtender things. I went, let me take a guess, to be on a nuclear sub. And he goes, well, that or a fast attack. And I went, no. I said, I don't like things that purposely sink. And he goes, but you'll fly on an airplane, it's sucked in the air. And I went, that's okay. I have a chance to get out. I got a parachute.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Before we get into leaving the service, I remember, if you don't mind, the story about you jumping out of an airplane, and I think something happened with your parachute. You told me this story like, I think 10 years ago. Would you be willing to share that here?
Yeah, that was in training, and we got up to we were going out on a jump. There's several jumps, two of them that I remember forever. But the first jump I had, the biggest thing they always told us was the first one's the hardest, because it's not natural to jump out of an aircraft at high altitude and hope that that parachute is going to take you safely down to the ground. And so we're in a C-130. We go out, get over the target, and I'm probably about, I don't know, 10 or 12 people back. The first two guys jump, and then suddenly we went from a green light to a red light, and the air crew back there yells, grab a hold of something. And of course, we just lean over and grab the side of the aircraft, and the whole aircraft shook and shook, and you heard a big boom. And it's like, what's going on? And and then the air crew's yelling back and forth with the flight crew. I look out the little window hole in the door, and the engine's on fire. And I'm going, this is not good. Now, I didn't understand. A C-130, yeah, if you get the fire out, you can pretty much fly it on 2 engines if you have to. But so we're all standing there, and next thing I know, the green light comes on. The air crew's going, get your guys off of here now. And I'm going, well, it's on fire. Do I want to go and crash or jump off? It's going to be easy. We're jumping. And so that was my first flight, or my first jump. That was made it much easier to go out the aircraft. The other one was my first nighttime high altitude jump. And my chief had told me, he says, you want something really amazing. He says, when you jump out, he says, roll over on your back and close your eyes, count to 10, and then open them up. And I'm like, why is that? He goes, you're going to be amazed. He goes, because by that time, the aircraft will be out of your sight. You won't see the flashing lights or nothing like that. I went, okay. So I jumped out, and of course, I made sure I was in position. I looked up, saw the aircraft, and I rolled over on my back and did exactly what he said. I counted 10, opened my eyes, and I was in awe. I didn't even realize, it was like I lost track that I was falling. And I'm just looking up at all these stars, dark, everything black, and I'm just going, wow. And I said, you cannot explain what that's like or the feeling unless you've actually done it. It's impossible. I mean, you realize how small you are to the rest of the universe. And I'm going, this must be what the astronauts feel like. I said, this is amazing. And of course, I'm just going down, just taking it all in. And next thing I know, I hear on my comm and my chief's yelling at me, roll over and get ready to open your chute. I went, oh, okay. I looked at my altimeter and I'm like, yeah, I better do that soon. But I mean, there was no moon out. So all you saw was stars, but they were so bright. That's the amazing part.
Love it.
So that was my two big jump ones that I'll always remember.
Those are beautiful ones, but I remember the bad one. I don't know if you want to share that or not, but it's pretty
It was a little scary at that time because the realization was you have an engine on fire and they're trying to get it out, but there's no guarantee you're going to get it out. Yeah. And now what I do know is when we got all off, we had talked to them after we got back, talked to the air crew. They said, yeah, they actually feathered it out. They tried the fire bottles. Nothing was working. They ended up putting it in a dive and shutting off fuel, and it finally went out. And I was like, yeah, okay, I would rather not be on that for that one. So it is what it is.
Okay, I'm going to dig a little deeper. Maybe you don't remember, you told me this, but the one where you actually, it didn't go well when you landed. Remember that one?
Oh, the one that I had. You're talking about the one that I had the Mae West parachute. Yeah, that was a little bit. Yeah, that was another night jump. And I was one of the last ones to go off. And I popped the chute. And next thing I know, I'm getting yanked one direction and being spun around. And I couldn't figure out at first what was going on. So I'm over there fighting the lines. And I realized that some of the lines were wrapped over the top of the chute. So I'm going mass panic now. And not even keeping track of my altimeter. I'm just trying to get this parachute open. And we didn't have, because it was, you were supposed to open your chute at a low altitude. We can't call them what they are, but anyhow. So they only give you one chute. You don't have two chutes because, well, it's either going to open or it's not. And fortunately, we were over water. That was a plus in my favor. But I remember flying by the guys in their parachutes, and they saw me, and they had talked to me later after they got up to me. It was, man, they thought for sure I was going to be out of it, but I must have gotten some of the chute out to slow it down a little bit. But man, hitting that water, it felt like I hit brick. Yeah. I mean, it knocked the wind out of me. I may have been slightly unconscious at first. I don't know. I just remember coming to, my back hurt, I had tingling down the legs. I was in a lot of pain. And I got the chute off and everything else, and I'm just trying to get my gear on and get my breath and stuff like that. About that time was when everybody was coming up, man, are you okay? Are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'll be fine. I said, it twisted my back pretty hard. Yeah. And later on, we found that, yeah, herniated several discs at the same time. So, but I mean, that's one I try to just not worry about, think about anymore.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't have brought it up, but it's just interesting, the things you've been through. I mean, so many things. Especially today, I learned a lot of stuff that I didn't even know about your training experience and being like training other people and being an instructor. It makes a lot of sense how you got where you got in your career. So
I had no intention of being in the special forces. They had actually came. That's a story in itself.
Oh, you can tell it if you want. Yes.
I got in trouble for something. And that's just before I realized something that was right. So anyhow, I just lost track where we were at.
Special forces. You did something wrong to get in there, sort of.
Yeah. Okay, so part of our areas with working with special weapons. All right, and we'll just leave it at that. They're not the standard conventionals. And we normally, you don't go downstairs to get these things. They bring them up to you. For some reason, we had to go down and pick one up. And I just happened to see a friend of mine that I hadn't seen for, God, I don't know, almost 6 months. And I thought maybe it transferred out because I knew he was coming up. And I just turned and said, hi. And of course, the Marine Guard who was with us is, puts his gun down. Of course, I'm kind of laughing a little bit because there's no ammunition in it. So it's like, point the gun. What are you going to do? Shoot me with a blank? Yeah. But I'm just like, he goes, look, none of us want to be here. And I'm like, hey, it's just a friend of mine. I hadn't seen him for a long time. I thought he transferred out. I just said hi. So we get done with that. And you have to go through this retraining every 6 months so that there's never any mistakes. And so I was like, okay. Well, in the training, I'd been through it so many times. I knew what they were going to say. I had it memorized. So I'm just over here sketching out things that were in my head at the time. And I sketched out this goofy schematic. No idea what it was. It was just some kind of a wiring schematic of some type. And so they said, okay, all scratch paper, everything has to be turned in because it's all classified as secret. Okay, submit it all in. Well, what I didn't know is I wadded it up, threw it in there. Well, they shred it, and of course, and they look through what everybody's doing, what they're writing about, stuff like that, or sketching. And that's what got me in trouble was what I sketched out. Like about a month and a half later, we're out at sea, and some people come to visit from, at that time it was called NIS, Naval Investigation Services, and they're having charges of espionage and all this other stuff, and I'm going, wait a minute, what are you talking about? And so we went back and forth, and they had talked to Commander Finney several times because they're asking me, what kind of a person do I have access to, classified material? And he goes, well, yeah. He says, but he's more anal about following the rules on classification, stuff like that, and handling of classified material than anybody in this command. So he says, I think, he's telling them, I think you got something wrong. Well, they came and went back and forth, and one guy was playing bad cop the whole time. I think he was just mad at everybody. Another guy was kind of nice, and he didn't talk to me too much. And he's like, well, take a look at this thing. He goes, and he showed me the picture, and he goes, what is this? Do you know? And I went, I ain't got a clue. He goes, well, it's part of a special weapons. And I'm going, nothing I deal with. I said, I have no idea what that is. I said, so tell me, what is it? And he goes, well, we'll talk about that later. And so they started asking some questions. And I'm going, well, it had to have been something I saw somewhere. And I told him, I said, it'd have to be in a manual or a book or something, because I do a lot of reading and a lot of engineering stuff. So I said, but I don't think I've done anything that would be classified. I would never draw it out knowing if it had a classified status or something like that. Well, he started asking me some weird questions, and I'm going, okay, I don't know. And I'm like, I said, because he was asking about study and stuff, and how do I learn things. I said, some stuff, I said, I read it. I said, you could ask me an hour from that. I'd be lucky if I recite most of it back. I said, and a day from now, forget it. I said, a couple of weeks from now, it's a whole different story. So he finally had told me that it was the arming schematic for the arming mechanism for a nuclear warhead. And I'm going, where would I have seen that? And then it dawned on me, and I'm going, And I told him about the stuff because they brought that up. Well, you were talking to somebody down there in the weapons department. I'm like, it was just a friend. I just said hi. Well, it ends up he was working on the arming mechanism, and he had a schematic laying up on the board. Now, how I was able just to glance at it and bring it back, I felt that a little far-fetched, but I went, okay. So they went through a whole bunch of testing, showed me diagrams and this and that and everything else. And then I think it was like the following day, the guy that didn't like me, that's the way I put it, he comes in and starts asking me, and I went, it was a wiring diagram. He said, well, draw it out. And I went, I can draw some of it. I said, I have no idea, not of any detail. And he asked me some questions and stuff, and I went, okay. I said, I think it said this. I think it said that. And he goes, well, I think you're lying. I think you're, and I'm like, so the other nice guy comes in, and he goes, okay. He says, you didn't do too good. I said, I told you, it doesn't work like that. I said, it's not photographic memory. I said, I know guys that have that. They look at it, and you can come back tomorrow and ask them. They can recite it right back to you. I said, it doesn't work for, I said, it takes about a week to 2 weeks on me. And I said, and then I get most of it or I get all of it. It just depends. He goes, okay. So they were like, well, we're going to keep them on restriction for the next 2 weeks. And my skipper's going, we're at sea in the middle of the Indian Ocean. He says, he's not going anywhere. It's 3,000 miles to the nearest piece of land. And it's hostile land at that. Okay. So they came back 2 weeks later, and the nice guy showed up. The other guy didn't. Sat down, and he gave me a test. It was like, draw the schematic you remember, draw this, draw that, explain to me what you saw here. What was it? And we went through everything, and the guy comes back, and he's reading and looking, and he's like, man. He says, it's like you were looking at it. He says, the accuracy, he goes, I'm going to write this off as this is a fluke. So the threats of court-martial and everything all finally went away. And we finished our cruise, came back to Japan. I'm working on an aircraft in Atsugi, and I get this guys come out to me. Hey, Ski. And I'm like, what? He goes, you need to get over to the skipper's office now. I'm like, why? He goes, I don't know. He says, there's a bunch of brass. They're all officers. He goes, and I'm going, what did I do wrong now? I said, I didn't do anything. He says, well, I'd get over there now. He says, I've never seen that much in that room or in that building ever. And I'm going, ugh. So I go over there, and I was originally I was going to clean up, and I'm like, okay, I'm not going to do that. Just clean my hands, walked in, did the usual thing. You knock on the door, you walk in, Payoff Sosnicki, reporting his orders, sir. And the skipper looks at me, and he goes, do you know what you're here for? I said, no, sir, and I don't care what they said. I didn't do it. And one guy in the far corner goes, I like this guy. And I'm going, I have no idea who you are. So I'm standing there, and my skipper goes, well, do you know anybody here? And I'm looking down the line. These are all officers. I'm going, no. And the one officer who was a commander with that group, he says, turn around and look at the guys behind you and tell me if you know any of them. And I look back there, and I'm going, what are they doing in uniform? They're civilians. I said, they were out at the firing range. And he goes, and I said, and yeah, they brought me out there to shoot a bunch of guns when we did our rifle and pistol calls. He goes, well, the SEALs on their downtime usually run the stuff, and they do it in civilian clothes. I went, okay. So that's when he starts. He goes, well, have you ever heard of the SEALs? And I'm like, yeah, I know. I said, I got a distant uncle in it. He goes, yeah, we know. We already talked to him. And I'm going, so why are you asking me these questions? And they went, well, we feel that you need to try out. I went, well, I want to go air crew. I said, I want to get into flying. I want to get my degree. I want to be a pilot. I said, I have my hats off to you guys. I said, I have a lot of respect for you, but I said, I don't know if I could make it through the training from what I've heard. I said, I've looked at the guys that go in there and I am not built that way. And he goes, well, we're not really, you have to understand, we look at a lot of different things. And I'm like, what is it that you'd want me for so much? I said, and that you're pushing this so hard. He goes, you have something we can't teach people. He says, when people go out, and he says, when the teams go out, they have to take cameras and stuff. If they get captured or the camera gets lost, we lose the data. He says, to have somebody that doesn't need all that and can memorize it, come back 2 weeks later and recite it all back to us, that's what we need. And I'm going, well, what says I'm not going to try if I go to Buzz? He goes, again, we've already talked to your uncle. And I'm going, and of course, and we've also talked to your CEO. You're not one to give up. And I'm like, great. Bites me in the butt. I went, okay. So November, October. Must have been the end of October of 81. I go to Coronado. This is through Buds. And that's still this day, I don't know how I managed to make it through. I have no idea. I watched guys bigger than me dropping out. A lot of them through Hell Week, and it was like right toward the end. And I didn't keep track of the days. They were counting them down. I think some of them were even counting down the hours. And I'm just like, I just took each individual task. And that was my goal. Get through this task at all costs. And then if there's another one, then you just get through that one. And you just keep going on and on and on. And I'm like, sooner or later, it'll be over. Or I'll pass out. I'll find myself in medical. And then I'll be out of the program. I won't have to worry about it. And I actually ended up accidentally making it through.
Yay.
And so that's how I got into the teams.
I love it. Thanks for sharing that. That is so awesome. I know you have a photographic memory. I know you say you don't, but I know you do. I can see why they grabbed onto you. You remember way too much. I know that about you.
Well, and that's interesting because on my retirement, the Navy wasn't going to let me retire at first.
Mm-hmm.
I kept dropping, the average person was getting their reply back from DC within about 2 to 3 weeks. At 4 months, I still had everything, and I only have 2 months left to do everything for retirement. I'm going, wait a minute. So I ended up calling up the detailer who I knew, and I went, what's going on? He goes, Ted, he says, I had no idea how many NECs you had or which ones you had. He goes, these guys are having meetings here and at the Pentagon almost daily about you. I'm like, what are they having a meeting for? He goes, to find out whether they're willing to let you go or not. And I'm going, I'm an E6. I'm at 20. They don't have a choice. I said, they could make me a chief or an officer. I said, but both of those require an act of Congress. I said, I don't see that happening. And I said, and half the stuff I can't do anymore. I got too many injuries. I just can't do the job anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I said, yeah, would I like to stay in? I would love to. but not as an E6. He goes, okay. He says, I'll go talk to him. And it was about a week and a half later, they sent out a message that said, approved under certain circumstances. And they flew a guy out. First time I've ever seen somebody come in with a briefcase handcuffed to their wrist, which I keep laughing about. And we had to go over to base legal, and they took me in this, I call it a conference room, but there's no windows, all this other junk. And it's, it was a conference room for interrogation. So the guy sits down, he has me answer a bunch of questions, and I had to write a bunch of stuff out about different things that went on. He came back, he goes, okay, give me a minute. He says, I got to review these things. And he goes, go ahead, sit in your attorney's office for a while. And they did assign an attorney with me at the time. And I was like, it's kind of weird. I've never heard of this before. And so we sat there and shot the breeze. And then my attorney went to check in on the thing, and he comes back like 30 minutes later. I'm going, that's like a long time waiting to find out. He goes, well, they were actually on a phone call. He says, but I'll explain it to you later. I said, okay. He says, but they're ready to let you sign. He said, they got the paperwork, everything. So I go in there, and I'm reading this paperwork. It says, and you're subject to recall, and yada, yada, yada. And at recall, it says subject to recall up to, and if I recall, it was like September 30th, 2056. And I'm going, I started laughing, and I'm going, now I've talked to people like chiefs and master chiefs that are retired, and they have to sign something, but it's only out for like 10 years later, so they hit their 40-year mark and it's over. I'm like, 56, I'm going to be dead. He goes, did we misspell something? I went, no. I said, not that I know of, but I said, 2056. I said, what are you going to do? Bring me back from the dead? And the guy looked at me in a serious face. He goes, we reserve that right. And I'm going, chills. And I looked at my attorney, and he goes, I'll explain it to you later. I'm going, at the time, the only thing over my head is like, I don't know if I should be scared and try to run or what. Or think this guy's on just a nut farm. So I signed it, and I said, okay, fine. And I said, so does that mean I don't get my last honorable discharge till 2056? And he goes, yeah, basically. And I'm going, okay, whatever. And so we go back to the attorney's office. He says, the reason it took me so long, he goes, your accuracy on stuff. They were looking over the notes from missions, and you as if you were just there. And I'm going, I said, this is like a nightmare. I said, but what's the 2000? He says, because it gives them the right that if you release this classified information, they can recall you, court-martial you, and put you away. And I went, not like I'm going to give that information out. And some of the stuff nobody would believe. Mm-hmm. And he goes, I get that, but he says, they're just covering their sins. And I'm going, this is stupid. I said, but I don't even get a letter from the president that says you're discharged. Thank you for all your service until after I'm done. He goes, well, he says, on a good point, he says, your next of kin will get that. And I'm like, and so they'll have something to wipe their butt with?
No, they'll save it forever. They'll save it forever.
Oh.
It's a big deal. Yeah, remember Dana got one? Whee! Sorry.
Oh, wow. Cool.
Yeah, I'll show you later. It's super awesome.
So anyhow, that was the only really goofy one that toward the end, I was like, I'm going to be so happy to walk out of here because this is just
I
turning
know.
into a nut farm.
I remember you told me part of this story before. It's about
Now,
the 20.
I told Dana about this
Yep.
many years ago, and he just shook his head. He says, well, you do remember a lot. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm getting punished for it.
Oh, you should have hit it a little bit, put a little bit of mistakes in there, here and there. You should have covered. You didn't know, though. You were just trying to do your best job. Oh, man.
So, anyhow.
Yeah, you were perfect for writing the obit for that reason, too. So thank you for that. So anything else before we go to leaving the service section?
Oh, man.
Anything you want to
I mean,
add?
I had a good career. I really did. I never.
How many years was it? I don't think we stated that. How many years were you in?
I spent 20 years, 2 months, and 13 days.
There you go. Oh, and you were going to correct something from the form. So let's get that in the.
Oh, that was the sea service.
Mhm.
I've actually got 7 sea service awards, not 6. Yeah, and it's kind of goofy because sea service for the Naval Marine Corps used to be, well, I think it still is, for each deployment on a ship, and it has to be over a certain amount of days, and then you get the sea service ribbon. Well, out of those 7, I have 5 years on the water. So I always laugh. I'm like, okay, so I got 5 stars for actual being on the water for 5 years, and then the other ones are talking these little kitty cruises.
Kitty cruises. That's cute.
Oh, and so okay, whatever.
So what happened? Oh, sorry. Continue.
Yeah, it's just like the I classify it the same as a good conduct ribbon or a good conduct medal. It's
Yeah.
many years of not getting caught.
Yeah. That's good.
But,
you did a great job, and thank you.
yeah,
for
but yeah, and I had, back to what I was originally going to say, I never intended to stay in that long.
That's right.
When I first went in, I was like, I'm going to do my tour and then get out and use the GI Bill and go finish my education, and then probably come back in as an officer. And then I found out you could do that while you're in, so I tried that. Of course, that didn't work out. And then each time I was up for transfer or decision to either re-enlist for more years or whatever, as I call it, they always brought out this nice, beautiful little carrot. And I was like, I like that. And I go ahead and do it. So but I've served some amazing people out there over the years. And I don't know if I would ever want to repeat it in the way of at a different rank so that I never met those people.
Interesting.
Some of them were just I don't know. Some of them amazed me. I had an airman that amazed me one time, and he was just brand new to the Navy. And I realized, because I, unlike everybody else, where they just, we're going to look at you and make our own opinion, I go in and look at their service record. And this guy had to do his TAD time on the ship. So I was like, okay, we're going to put you in First Lieutenant Division, which is just cleaning up. And I went, and we're going to assign you to the first class compartment. And everybody's like, oh, you should never do that. You should never do that. And I said, trust me, this kid's going to be able to take care of himself. And I said, oh, they're going to try to push him around. I went, I don't think so. He had 3 black belts and 3 different martial arts. I went, no, if they try to push him around and bully him around, they're going to find themselves on the floor. And after I told the first class that was in charge of the First Lieutenant Division, he goes, really? And I said, look at his service record. Look at this. I said, he's got college education. He's got two brown belts and three black belts. And I'm like, this kid could cream anybody here.
Cream.
And they just look at him and like, but he just doesn't come across that way. He doesn't come aggressive. I said, that's because martial arts is not about being aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
I said, the ones you have to worry about are the ones that are quiet.
Yeah.
And he goes, okay. And after that, it was, Aramis also, could you please go do this? Could you be really, really nice and take care of this problem here? And rather than like the other kids, they go, Aramis also, go get this done now.
Oh.
So, and I always went with the aspect, and maybe that's what made me different than everybody else's. I didn't care whether you were an airman. I didn't care whether you were the highest educated person. Everybody has an input, and everybody looks at something differently. And because of that, even though we've done it this way all the time, ask for input. Because the youngest guy may be looking at something differently than everybody else and have a great input for it. And I ran into that several times where I'm like, that's a great idea. Let's go with it. And of course, I get told by my seniors, oh, you can't do it that way because it's never done. I said, this is going to save us time. I think it's a good idea.
Yeah.
Let us try it. I'll take the fall on if that happens. And of course, it always worked out. And then, of course, mine, which was my last command, didn't make the chief's list. And I was the senior first class. So they left me behind in charge of maintenance control for a week while they went out and did their chief's initiation stuff. And we had the maintenance meeting with all the chiefs there. And they said, well, this is how it's going to work and yada, yada, yada. And I was like, okay. So I gave the meeting out just the way they wanted it. Once the chiefs all left, I called all the supervisors back in. I said, look, we're going to do this a little bit differently. I said, if you have a problem, come to me and let me know. But just don't come and tell me I have this problem. Come with a solution.
Oh, you sound like my boss.
I said, I want them both. I want the problem and I want solution. And then we'll talk about the solution and whether it makes sense or not. And of course, it wasn't even an hour later, and I get somebody coming in. Well, we have this such problem on aircraft 301. And I'm going, okay. And he goes, and what? What's the solution? Well, I'm waiting for you to tell me. And I'm like, this is your rate. Go back to your shop and figure it out. And then come back and see me. And he finally did. Well, I'm thinking this. I said, well, will that cause an effect on this aircraft or this one? Will this? And then we went through all the stuff. We go, well, yeah. Okay, go back and find a better solution. So then my AT came in. And he goes, I got a problem with the IFF transponder on this aircraft here. And I said, okay, so when can we get one out of supply? And he goes, tomorrow morning. Oh, and that ain't going to work. I said, we got a flight tonight. That bird's down. The other one's coming back in. And it requires such servicing before it can turn around. And we got to get this one off the deck. And I said, give me a good idea. Hello? So he says, we could take it out of the ready alert aircraft, put it in this one, and have everything on standby. And then as soon as that aircraft taxis out and takes off and the other one lands, I'll yank the IFF immediately out of that, put it back in the ready alert. I'm like, okay, how long are we talking? And he goes, well, the other one's on file right now. These guys are turning, ready to go. He goes, we're talking 15 minutes. I went, you have 20, period. And it better be up. Boom, boom. Worked like a champ. First thing in the morning, the new IFF went in. We had everything. We were ready for the flight schedule, did all the flights, and the whole week worked like that. We had 100% sortie rate. Chiefs come back, and we're back to the 90% sortie rate all the time. And the CO finally comes down. He goes, toward the end of the deployment, he goes, I have a question. And he goes, I'd like to get some understanding. He says, why is it we went anywhere between 80 and 90% sortie rate all the way up to this 1 week? And suddenly we're at 100, and then we went back down. What changed? And they're like, oh. And of course, one of the other first classes that were there, oh, that was the week the Chiefs were all gone for the Chiefs initiation, and Sosnicki was running maintenance control. And the skipper looked at the master chief going, so my first class who didn't make chief ran it and gets 100% sortie rate. When I have 6 chiefs in here, E7 and above, and I can't get above 90. Think about that one.
I love it.
Well, that just torqued the chief shorts, and they disliked me a little bit more, but that's all right. I didn't care.
Ted's coming through. Watch out. I love it. You ready to talk about life after service? Or you want to talk about life after service now? You ready for that part?
About which one?
Life after service. How was that for you?
Life after
you left the service. What was it like? You know, what happened?
Yeah. Life after service has been up and down. I mean, it's got some really good points. All right, so volume's all good now.
Thanks for fixing it.
All right, so I got out in 2000 and couldn't find anything, any work up in Washington State or Alaska, which is where I really wanted to go. And then I got talked into a recruiting firm that was recruiting stuff down in Northern California. And I'm going, I really don't want to go there, but okay. If that's where the jobs are at, that's where you got to go. So went down there, and they set up this 2 or 3 day deal. And it was me and a chief that was both of us retiring out of Washington. And we got 2 vans and took everybody down. We get down there. Now the chief and I ended up being roommates for that time frame, and he was trying to figure out what he was going to do. And I'm like, management, training. He goes, I don't know anything about training. I said, you train people all the time.
Yeah.
I said, yeah, you're taught them on subs, much different than aircraft, but I said, it's all the same. Training is training. So, in fact, his name was Tom Fonz. I don't know that. So he gets on, and of course, they set you up with, I think, 4 interviews over 2 days. Well, my first interview was the first thing on, I think, Saturday morning. And the second one was right after it. And then I was going to basically be down for the rest of the day. And what I didn't know was they do all these first ones, and then they have a lunch meeting with all the companies that are employing. And they talk to them about, their interviews and the people they met, so on and so forth. Well, they had the meeting or the luncheon, and then I'm sitting in the room waiting for these recruiters to get back to our staging area. And they come up to me and they went, what are you saying in your interviews? And I went, just answering the questions and telling them the truth.
Yeah.
I said, why? He goes, you are the talk of the lunchroom. He goes, you now have 4 interviews this afternoon. And instead of having 2 of them tomorrow, you've got 8 of them tomorrow. He goes, these people are frothing over you. He goes, I've got 6 more that want to interview you, but there's not enough time. And I'm going, oh. He goes, what kind of questions? So I tell them, well, they're asking this and this and this. And he goes, and what are you telling them? I'm just telling them what I know. That's it. Done. And they just, okay. Well, before the end of the first day, I already had one company that was providing an offer. And they hadn't even interviewed me. It was strictly from the talk and looking at my resume. And he goes, I want to talk to him before we leave. And he says, for the day. And he says, I want to give him an offer. So they came up to me and introduced me and everything else. I said, okay. And he goes, you have a lot of experience here. He says, it's amazing what you've done. He goes, I want to give you an offer. Would you consider being in upper management for, it was for Hershey's chocolate. And I looked at him and I went, I said, don't take this wrong. And I very much appreciate, the offer and going out of your way on this. I said, but I have to have something that draws me, that pulls down here and says, this is my mission. This is what I need to do. And I need focus. And I said, I'm a leader. I'm not just a manager. And I said, and I'm highly allergic to chocolate. So there's no motivation there at all. And I said, you have a lot of very talented people out here that have management backgrounds. And he goes, yeah, but he says, nothing like yours. And I'm like,
sorry.
Trust me, I appreciate it. I thank you very much. But I said, to be honest, I said, I would not want to come and get hired by you after you bring me down here and things like that, only to go out and find another job and walk away from it.
Yep.
I said, it's not right. It's not fair to you. It's not fair to anybody. And he just looks at me and he goes, I have never had anybody tell me so nicely, go fly a kite. And I'm like, that's not what I was saying. He goes, no, he says, you have legit reasons. And he says, and I'm thinking of management as just management. I said, no, there's a big difference between management and leadership. Leadership, you get all your people to want to follow you. And you have that for motivation. I said, being a management, yeah, can I be a dictator and force people to? I said, yeah, but then you're going to lose a lot of good employees sooner or later. They're just going to walk away, find another job. I said, you want to build your company. You want to become better and stronger. And the only way you're going to do that is by keeping people on, keeping that attrition rate down. And he just looks at me and he goes, God, I wish you weren't allergic to chocolate. He goes, you're better than any of my managers and some of my directors. And I went, well, I'm sorry, but I believe in being honest.
Yeah.
He goes, okay. He says, I get it. I thank you very much. So we went on our way. The next day, I get an offer in the morning before I even started my first interview from Gutter Chocolate.
Oh, no way.
And I go through the same thing. He goes, well, we do have candy division. I'm going, I'm not a big candy person. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I said, I just don't, I'm not big on sugars and stuff like that. I said, it's just because of the allergies, you stay away from it. And same thing, not some of the same comments, but he goes, well, that's kind of a bummer. He says, man, he says, you would have been a good one. I said, well, that may be, but I said, it's not right for you.
Yeah.
I said, it would be fair.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that very much. Well, I found out that the comments that were made at with Hershey's chocolate were actually put out at the morning breakfast for all the employers. But Gutters got there late because he was focused on getting the paperwork in hopes of hiring me on. And so he missed the thing about, this guy is honest. He's 100% legit. He doesn't try to blow smoke up your butt. He does everything right. So listen to him and take in. By the end of the day on Sunday, I had 4 companies that wanted to bring me back for the second interview that following day or that night. I'm sorry, the Monday. They wanted me to stay behind. And I went, I can't do that. I said, you have 2 designated drivers, and I'm one of them. I said, we have to drive everybody back. We have to turn the vans back in. They're in our name. I can't leave everybody stranded. I said, now, if you want to fly everybody back to Washington, then I can stay.
Yeah.
Well, interesting part was I had the first night I had sat down with the chief and went through what some of the interviews he had, and then I coached him on how to answer questions, how to address training, what things to look on, what things to pull back on. And so he ended up having interviews with the same people I did. Well, we got both invites on the exact same day.
That's funny.
And we purposely scheduled it at different times. And we had them with KLA Tincor, Applied Material, Lam Research, Assist Technologies. I forget who the other one was. But it was kind of comical because what we would do is we scheduled it so they were all done within like 2 days. Or I'm sorry, 3 days. So we both had rooms right down from each other in the same hotel. And I'd go in like he did Applied Materials, and then I was following suit. Well, he had saw me on the way out, and I said, so did they give you an offer? He goes, yeah. I said, what did they offer you? And he goes, oh, they're offering me $56,000 a year. And I said, that's too low for this area. That fast. So I went and did mine. They threw everything. And in fact, I had on the second interview process, I actually walked out of the interview. The one guy made one comment. And I said, closed my book up, said, thanks for having me out here, and walked out.
What's the comment? Do you remember the comment?
Yeah. He had asked, so I understand you're retiring from the Navy. And I said, yes. And he goes, can I ask what rank he retired at? I said, yeah, it's not classified. I said, he retires at E6. He goes, oh, you couldn't make E7?
Oh, goodbye. Yes.
That was it. I told him, I said, I'm done.
Rude.
And I said, I'm getting out. I'm retiring. I'm not here to play military anymore.
Yeah.
And so I took that and walked out. Well, I found out he was the last one. But I ran into the training director. And he goes, oh, that was fast. I said, yeah. I said, I'm done. I said, thanks for having me out here. I said, yeah, I'll send you a letter saying thank you. He goes, but you haven't done the teach through yet, and I'm going. I said, I'm actually done. And I told him what had gone in there. And I said, I don't need to work with anybody like that. He goes, oh, please, please. He said, at least do the teach through. He says, if it goes to the offer letter and you deny it, that's one thing. He says, but if you don't do the teach through, he goes, they'll fire me. And I'm going, you're a nice guy. I'm not going to get you fired. So I went, okay, fine. I went in there. And they threw every wrench in the gearbox you could possibly think of that would be involved in a trainer to mess them up and get them flustered where they wouldn't teach that well. So you have the guy coming in late, you have the one that talks over everybody, you have the one that reads ahead, you have technical problems that go on. So we started the thing off with, they couldn't open the file I emailed. I said, okay, here it is on a USB stick. Then they couldn't get access to the USB stick. I said, okay, no problem. Try an SD drive. Couldn't get that one to work. Then they couldn't get the overhead projector to work. And it just kept snowballing everything. And I'm going, he goes, man, I don't know what else we could do because, we tried to put my computer up and nothing was working. And I looked over in the corner and there was an old overhead projector. Had a lot of dust on it. I went, that thing still work? He goes, what? I said, the overhead projector. He goes, I don't know. He says, nobody's used that thing for years. I said, well, let's find out. So we dusted it off, plugged it in, turned it on, and went, okay. I said, this will work. Got it all lined up, walked over to my bag, pulled out all kinds of overheads, dropped them down, put out my instructor guide, and handed out student guides. And they were just like, it's like, nobody's done that. And they did everything. And every time they would interrupt me, it was like, I'd correct it and go right back to where I left off at, as if I'd been doing this for 100 years. Got all done, and they finally stopped it, and he goes, I think we've seen enough. And they walked, and I said, okay. So I took all my stuff, went out in the waiting room, and he comes back out, and he goes, that was amazing. He goes, my best instructors would have gotten flustered on half of that. Mm-hmm. He goes, you were like, it's nothing. And he says, and to have overhead projectors, I said, when you come to an interview, you come to training, you be fully prepared for every situation. I said, that's how you're supposed to do it. And he goes, man. He goes, well, I think they're going to give you an offer right now. I'm, okay. So I hung around. And the HR person comes out, she hands it to me. $52,000. Starting. I started laughing. Now, what she didn't know was I'd already been to KLA 10 Corps, who was offering me $68,000. And I just told her, she goes, did we spell your name wrong or something? I went, no. I said, don't take this wrong. I said, but you're not even in the ballpark.
Yeah.
I said, standard for training instructors with my kind of expertise, minimum is 68,000 starting and going up from that. And she goes, really? I said, yeah, and I've already got an offer for 68,000.
How many years ago was this? Sorry, real quick.
That was back in 2000.
Yeah, so
October of 2000.
Listeners, this is 26 years ago, so that would have probably equate to like 180 now. What do you think?
Yeah, it's about 180 here now.
Yeah, just so the kids are like out there thinking of joining the military. What? You only get jobs for 68,000? No, that'd be like 180 now.
Oh, with my experience, I could probably pick up a 250,000.
At this point, yes, at least.
But it was kind of comical on that one with applied materials, because I turned them down, and she takes things. She goes, well, let me go back and talk to everybody. I said, well, I got to get going. I said, I got some other stuff I got to go. I said, okay, we'll correspond to you. They sent me back another one for 68,000. I turned it down. Then they sent me back one for 86,000. I turned it down.
That's like 200 now.
Oh, I know. And
wow.
So the recruiter calls me up. He goes, because of course, the bigger the number, the bigger bonus for them. He goes, well, he says, I can get them up to 90, or even, he says, I think I can get up to 6 figures. And I said, it won't matter. So I'm not going to go work for them.
Oh, because it's not saying that.
Well, let me go talk to him and see what's going on. And they came back. He goes, they'll go way over 100,000 for you without a problem. And I said, look, I said, when I walked in the building, I knew I didn't want to work there. He goes, why is that? I said, you could feel the tension of the people walking around. I said, I don't need that. I've been under enough stress for 20 years.
Yeah.
I don't need to come into that environment.
Yeah.
And I said, and I don't want to work with that guy there. So unless they're going to fire him, there's no way I'm going to deal with it. Well, maybe he misunderstood him. I said, no, you couldn't make E7. It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
And he goes, well, yeah, well, I found out it was because he was a Marine. He made E7 and he was buddies with a bunch of chiefs and he became an honorary chief. And I'm going, I just shook my head. Yeah, that's like having an honorary dog.
Yeah.
So I turned them down, and then it kind of came down to Assist Technologies and KLA between all the other ones I'd interviewed with. And I picked Assist mainly because I had already met Dana.
Yeah.
I met Lee Waldwin. I met most of the trainers there, all of them prior service, and all of us thought the same and acted the same and had the same ethics and morals. And I was like, I could deal with this. So that's why I went on with Assist Technologies and enjoyed it there until they were starting to break up the company because of the new regime and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
And then Dana went over to Thermal Wave. And I remember I'd gotten laid off finally, which blew everybody away because I at that time was not only the only trainer for Assist Technologies, I was also one of my jobs was also with field service tech support for the world, and oversaw the what was it called? The Intel ASML account, which was a $33 million account, the largest one Assist had. And they pulled the individual who I won't name, just be nice, pulled me out of the office or out of a meeting. And the field service supervisor who was there, who I knew really well, was sitting in there, and they kept going, Ted, did you hear us? Are you there? And he goes, so-and-so just came and pulled Ted out to lay him off. And I got told, he goes, you could hear a pin drop. And it was all this mumbling in the back. And the director at Intel in charge of this program went, can you repeat that again? Well, Mr. So-and-so came and pulled Ted out to lay him off. And then he heard the door open up, and was two of our employees from Assist Technologies coming in the door. Now, the one person, Terrence Neal, massively phenomenal person, says, I don't know why I'm here. I was just told to report here. The other guy, who was friends with the person that laid me off, so, Mr. So-and-so was told us that we were supposed to come here because we're going to be taking over this and that and everything. The Intel director said, well, thank you for coming out. You two can both leave and head back to California. Have a nice trip. Then he got on the phone and he told Kevin, he goes, you tell them to notify your CEO and CFO that we're having a meeting Tuesday morning at this time, same call-in numbers, and they better be on there. And Kevin's like, oh, do you want me on the phone? He goes, yeah, we're going to want you on the phone too, just as a witness. So they all had the meeting, and Kevin came back. He goes, man, he says, Intel went up and down. And he says, and they were, Assist was, the higher ups were promising them all the same service, the same technical expertise, everything. And Intel said, you guys promised that for years and you almost lost the contract. And then Ted took it over with, along with Mike Bowman, who had it after Dana Galvin left. He says, and we almost pulled the contract when you put Mike Bowman in there. But Mike Bowman brought Ted in and everything came together and we were getting the service we needed. And he goes, or I'm sorry, she says, this is how it's going to work. You have 6 weeks to prove that we're going to get the exact same service. I'm sorry, 2 months. There's 6 weeks. So 3 months, or we're going to pull the entire contract. A month and a half later, they pulled the contract. $33 million gone. Then I find out they had came back to Assist, and Assist kept groveling to them, trying to get the contract back, stuff like that, for months. And they finally said, well, you're going to have to get a trainer in there that's PBET certified. You're going to have to get this. You're going to have to get that. All this stuff we want in play. And the person that laid me off was like, well, we can do that. We'll hire somebody on to take over that. Terrence Neal told them, what you need to do is bring Ted on for David Schoenthal's position and let David Schoenthal work under Ted and learn from him of how to manage and how to direct and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Well, of course, they didn't want to do that. So I find out that they hired 4 different people over the course of a year. I'm sorry, over a course of 6 months. The average time before they would quit was approximately 30 days. And their answer was always the same. There is no way that one person was doing all this.
Yeah.
It's impossible.
Yeah.
Well, the 5th person they got hired on had already gotten rumor on. He goes, look, he says, I'm not going to waste your time. He says, here's the agreement. If I came on, you're going to give me 2 months and you're going to answer and hire whoever I need to.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've looked over what you want done, and that's not a one-man person. That's 5 to 6 people. They had to hire on 5 people in order to cover me. I was like, that's a cost savings.
Yeah.
But the company, the CEO of Assist, kept driving the company in the ground just like he did his previous one before Applied Material bought him, except this time they didn't pay taxes for a couple of years. The SEC pulled their trade license. The FBI came in, and they closed them all down, which I felt bad about because Mihir, who was the founder of Assist, was trying to get the company back. And he was still the, quote, president, but not the CEO. But the board of directors wouldn't listen to him. So now everybody lost everything. And Mihir, I think, could have brought the company back. And Assist Technology was a phenomenal company.
Yeah. That's what Dana always said.
Yeah. I mean, it was really on top of it. Yeah, you had some goofy people in it, but you'll have that with anything.
Everywhere.
But then we went to Thermal Wave, and Dana brought me on over there, and that one was just amazing there because I was working on my master's at the time. They let me work. I had to work at the shop or at Thermal Wave so many days a week. The rest of the time I could work from home. So that really helped out. Especially since it was like 60 miles each way. So everything was going great. And I was tech writing, tech training, and stuff like that for Thermal Wave. And the program is the CCDI array, was a special inspection tool, and for Tokyo Electron. And Tokyo Electron came in finally, and they said, well, we have this meeting and we have to have all this stuff done by this time. So I actually spent 2 days at Thermal Wave. Basically Friday night and Saturday night, or Friday night and all Saturday, getting everything done. Got it all submitted. Then I'm told I had the next 3 days off and to relax, and we could. And then I also had the next couple days because those are my normal days off. So basically, I had a week off. So I come back the following week, and I get told, the CEO wants to talk to you when you have a chance. And this is by the director of HR. And I'm thinking, okay, what's going on? And I looked at him and I said, well, rumors got it. I guess Tokyo Electron's buying up the division. He goes, yeah, pretty much. I was like, okay. So I figure I'm going to go see the CEO, and it's going to be, well, we're going to have to lay people off, yada, yada, yada. But that's not what it was. He comes in, he goes, shakes my hand, he says, I want to thank you. I went, for what? He goes, I got a compliment from the CEO of Tokyo Electron. One that I've never, ever heard from anybody. He wanted to know who wrote the tech manuals, the training materials, and incorporated troubleshooting in the software for the tool.
Nice.
And he said, and I had to go and ask. And they said it was you. And I went, yeah. Well, these are the direct words from the CEO of Tokyo Electron. Out of all my years in the semiconductor industry, I have never, ever seen such a phenomenal manual, training program, and software package ever put together. He goes, that's why I'm not going to bounce around on the numbers. We're willing to pay top dollar for the whole program.
Nice.
I was like, cool.
Cool. That works for me. That's awesome, Ted. You did some amazing things. Worked at some.
But yeah, Dana was the one that found out that when we won't go into all the details on this one, but they were going to let me go from Thermal Wave because the CCI program was only going to hire so many people on. If somebody said something they shouldn't have, but I wasn't going to crucify Thermal Wave, HR, or the CEO or anybody else there, jeopardize their because of one person's comments.
Mm-hmm.
He did get talked to though, and we're still friends afterwards. He didn't have the training to be a manager. He didn't know. And he didn't realize that he shouldn't say stuff like that.
Yeah.
But when I walked over and told Dan, I said, yeah, they're laying me off. And he goes, huh? I said, yeah. I said, I already got my 2-week notice. And Dana panicked. He goes, but nobody knows this other equipment. I said, I don't know what to tell you. And that's why he went over to Clay Cunningham.
Oh, Clay.
And they had a couple meetings. And then Clay calls me in. He goes, so how much was the CCI program? I said, well, they're paying me $85,000. Oh, we could do that. He says, I can budget that. And he goes, give me a couple of days. I'll get all the paperwork done, stuff like that. I said, don't worry. He says, we can't afford to let you go. I went, okay, appreciate it. So stayed there. Dana was happy. He was all get out. And all he did is, well, I may need you to travel a little bit more. I said, I don't mind traveling. No big deal. But then they put me in charge of the TP tool, which is a thermal probe. And there was not that many people that knew that thing. That was it was a lot of fun. I mean, I really enjoyed thermal wave. I mean, it was like a family.
Yeah.
You know, it's just
And you guys still have a Facebook page.
actually assist refugees and thermal wave refugees were both out there. That's how I was refugees for both thermal wave and assist.
Yeah.
But yeah, both. I mean, thermal wave I found was a lot like a big family. They had some phenomenal scientists in there. I mean, and when I first got out there, I remember being told even by Dana that some of them were a little bit up here because we got a PhD, and I said I can work on them. Don't worry about it. And he says, yeah. He says they kind of look down or talk to you, and I remember one of the ones they talked about. I had a meeting with him, and of course he started using the bigger words. So I started using bigger words, and it was pretty soon he kind of looked at me really strange. He goes, "Do you have a PhD?" And I went, "No, I only got a master's degree." I said, "I've been asked by several people to get my PhD and offered, but I said I turned it down." I said, "Why is that?" I said, "Don't worry about it. It doesn't matter." He goes, "Oh, okay." And after that, it was fine. Everything was copacetic. I could go in there. Hey, I need this done by your guys, or I need to have this. And then we had one about the training. And he goes, well, he says, I talked to the guys, and they said, you need to kind of assume these certain things. And I said, no. In the manual and the training, you never assume anything. I said, that's how you break tools. I said, if you go in there and you write everything down, I said, you should be able to take something off the street without some kind of mechanical ability, bring them in here, and they should be able to follow the instructions and not miss a beat. That's how you do it. Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. So then he made his guys all do the stuff. I said, he goes, well, how do you know that they're not doing it? I said, because I follow their instructions and try to follow them on the tool. When I run into a problem, I go back and go, you can't go from here to here. It's impossible. The tool will, oh, well, you have to do this. Well, why is that not in writing? Well, you have to assume. I said, no. Assuming does exactly what it says. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, so I mean, I really, really enjoyed both of them. Then Thermal Wave got bought up by KLA.
Yeah.
And that was the funny one because I could have sworn they were going to lay me off really, really early. Because I do talk my piece and I'm a straight shooter. And they would say stuff like, well, why can't you teach this, teach that thermal probe the same way that we teach this other thing that they had? And I'm going, because yours is a piece of junk and this one's not. What do you mean by that? I said, it doesn't take a fool to figure out that you cannot grind glass twice and have them the same. Yeah. I said, but you got these things and you got a bunch of trained monkeys out there. I said, all they do is change parts. They don't know how to fix the tool and actually troubleshoot it. I said, second of all, I said, this is why thermal wave was at 162 nanometer and you guys were only at 128. And I said, oh, and by the way, the new equipment that the thermal wave engineers are working on is actually going to 284 nanometer. So I think we know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And after that, he came in. I just told him, I said, if you want to complain about the amount of time it takes to train, come in and watch the training class. And he actually came in a couple of times and watched. Why do you guys spend all this time on this thing? I said, because you have to be able to take the laser and shoot it and then have the same laser beam come back up through the laser. Mm-hmm. I don't understand that. And I have to try to explain it. Well, then KLA's object is we buy up a company who's a threat, we get their technology, and then we lay them all off. And that kind of backfired on them with us. So they had laid me off. Finally, and the director of training comes down. He had to escort me around and stuff. I was like the manager of training. And I swear I thought he was going to cry when I was leaving.
Oh.
And I was like, he goes, man, I'm really, really sorry. I said, it's not your fault. I said, I understand. This is how KLA does things. I said, this is why I didn't go to work with you guys way back in 2000 when you guys offered me the training position. And I said, it's not your doing. I said, I'll be fine. I said, this is just business and how it works.
Yeah.
And he goes, I've never had anybody with this kind of attitude. He says, normally they're pissed off. And I said, why? It's not your fault. You're not the one that did it.
Mm-hmm.
You're the one stuck with having to escort me around to make sure I got everything.
Mm-hmm.
I said, I think I got everything, but I think there's a couple things left in the clean room. I said, hopefully I'll be able to send an email to you and get them all back, which I never did, but that's beside the point. But yeah, Intel, the guerrillas, came to KLA finally and called them up and said, hey, we're ready to buy OptiProbe and Thermoprobes. And now that you guys have had ThermoWave for a year, you should be up on top of this and yada, yada. So send your guy down so we can talk about this. And he comes down, he starts giving a presentation of their Alaris tool. And they got stopped. And he goes, why are you showing us this? Well, I was told to come down here and show you the Alaris. We don't want the Alaris. The Alaris is a piece of junk. We want the Thermoprobe and OptiProbe. That's what you were supposed to come down here. So start showing it to them. Well, I don't have anything on those. Okay. Get backing, leave, go back, fly back, tell them, forget it. We'll cancel everything. So, of course, immediately Kelly's calling, wait a minute. And they said, no, we want the OptiProbe and the Thermoprobe because those are both the best products out there in the world. The teams have put them together, and he says, and you have everybody, or at least you bought it all and brought everybody over there, so you come up with an offer. And we're going to buy. They were going to buy, I forgot, it was an ungodly amount because a Thermoprobe was a $5 million tool.
Wow.
And they were going to buy 10 of them.
Wow.
And the OptiProbes weren't too far behind that, the newer ones. And they were going to buy something like 30 of them.
Dang.
And so then suddenly KLA goes, well, we need a little bit more time. They started calling up everybody that had been employed by ThermoWave, trying to bring them on, and everybody's telling them, no, thank you.
Yeah.
Watch you go down the smoke.
Yeah.
But that's when I can't remember if that was when Dana was, who he went to work with after that. I know he left just before KLA bought us up. Oh, he was working for that underwater scuba thing, whatever it was. It wasn't scuba.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, up in Seattle. I forgot the name of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was always good to I like keeping contact with a lot of my military friends, and Dana was just extra special when I was there.
Oh.
Well missed.
Definitely here as well.
But of course, in all this fun, I ended up meeting my wife finally. Got married. Wanted to get out of California, but didn't want to move back to Arizona. But she's from here, and
hold on.
I had always said,
running out of time. We just noticed, so we're going to do part 2 tomorrow, and you'll see that other video come up on Ted Sosnicki, and we're so happy to have him here. And we'll see everybody on part 2. Thank you so much, Ted, and see you later.
Thank you.
You served on active duty with purpose. Get that purpose back by joining the Marine Corps League.
Support the Lost Art Project Veterans Voices. Enter our quarterly raffle for a Saddleback Leather Company flight bag. 1 ticket for $10 or 3 for $25. Support veterans. Enter now. Every veteran has a story. Every story is a piece of history. Join the project as we collect, preserve, educate, and inspire. The Lost Art Project. Veterans' Voices. Preserving voices. Protecting legacies.